The champagne flute shattered against my childhood bedroom wall, a memory of a life I'd already lost. 6 months. It had been 6 months since Garrett walked out, and I still couldn't believe he'd had the nerve to leave me. Me! After everything I'd done to secure our future together. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Mallory asking if I wanted to grab drinks back in OKC. I ignored it. How could I face my friends now? How could I tell them that my perfectly crafted life had crumbled because of one stupid conversation? One moment of honesty that cost me everything. I picked up another champagne flute from the box on my floor. This one had been part of our engagement gift set from his pretentious aunt. I hurled it at the wall too, watching it explode into 1,000 pieces. Just like my plans. Let me back up. Let me tell you how I ended up here. Drunk at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, living with my parents at 29, destroying the last of my wedding gifts. Let me tell you about Garrett Pemberton and how I played my cards perfectly until I showed my hand too soon. We met at Oklahoma State, sophomore year. I remember seeing him in my Economics 201 class. This skinny kid with glasses who always sat in the 3rd row, always had his homework done early, always raised his hand with the right answer. Back then, I barely noticed him. I mean, sure, we were lab partners a couple times, and yeah, we'd grab coffee after study sessions, but that was it. He was just there. Background noise in my college experience while I dated guys like Trent Morrison, captain of the lacrosse team, and Jackson Reed, whose dad owned half, the car dealerships in Stillwater. Garrett would text me sometimes, asking if I wanted to study or catch a movie. I usually said I was busy, because I was. I was 20 years old and gorgeous, with long auburn hair and a body I'd sculpted through years of dance. Why would I waste my Saturday nights with a computer science major who wore the same 3 hoodies on rotation? I remember one time, junior year, he asked me to his fraternity formal. I actually laughed. Not to his face, I wasn't that cruel. But I made up some excuse about already having plans. Then I went to a different fraternity formal with Brady Chen, who drove a BMW and whose trust fund was legendary even among the rich kids at State. The truth was, guys like Garrett were invisible to me back then. Nice, sure. Smart, definitely. But boring, safe, predictable. I wanted excitement, adventure, passion. I wanted guys who made other girls jealous, who took me to exclusive parties, who could make my heart race just by walking into a room. After graduation, I moved to Oklahoma City to work in marketing for a mid-tier firm. The pay was decent, but not great. $42,000 a year before taxes. My studio apartment cost $1,100 a month, and between student loans, car payments, and trying to maintain the lifestyle I'd grown accustomed to in college, I was barely scraping by. The guys I dated weren't much better off. Sure, they had fancy job titles and expensive suits, but most of them were drowning in debt just like me. The investment banker who couldn't actually afford the bottles of Dom Perignon he ordered to impress me. The lawyer who was 3 months behind on his Mercedes payments. The pharmaceutical sales rep who split rent with 3 roommates despite his Rolex and designer shoes. By 25, I was exhausted. Tired of the games, tired of the facade, tired of maxing out credit cards to keep up appearances. My college friends were getting engaged left and right, posting pictures of massive diamonds and destination weddings. Meanwhile, I was eating ramen for dinner and pretending my knockoff designer bag was real. That's when I ran into Garrett at a Whole Foods in Nichols Hills. I almost didn't recognize him. Gone were the ill-fitting hoodies and thick glasses. He'd clearly been working out, gotten contacts, and his clothes. Well, they weren't designer, but they fit him perfectly. Clean, classic, expensive without trying too hard. "Sloane," he said, his face lighting up with genuine surprise. "Sloane Whitfield? Is that really you?" I forced a smile, trying to discreetly slide the generic cereal in my cart under the organic kale. "Garrett! Oh my God, how are you?" We chatted by the Olive Bar for a few minutes, catching up on the years since college. He mentioned something about a startup, some technical jargon I didn't really understand. I nodded along, making the right noises, already planning my exit strategy. "Hey, we should get coffee sometime," he said as I started to edge away. "Catch up properly. Are you free this weekend?" I almost said no, almost made up another excuse like I had a dozen times in college. But then I noticed his watch. A Patek Philippe. Understated, elegant, and worth more than my annual salary. "Sure," I heard myself saying. "Coffee sounds great." That coffee date changed everything. Garrett wasn't the awkward kid from economics anymore. He was confident, successful, and more importantly, he was rich. Really rich. His startup had been acquired by a major tech company, and he'd walked away with a 7-figure payout. Now he was working on another venture with even bigger potential. But here's the thing that made it all so easy. He still looked at me the same way he had in college. Like I was this unattainable goddess who had finally deigned to notice him. Every compliment I paid him, every laugh at his jokes, every casual touch on his arm, he absorbed it all like a man dying of thirst in the desert. Within a month, we were officially dating. Within 3 months, I'd moved into his penthouse apartment in Deep Deuce. The place was ridiculous. 3,200 square feet, floor-to-ceiling windows, a kitchen that belonged in a magazine. The rent alone was $6,000 a month, and he paid it like it was nothing. My friends were impressed. Hell, they were jealous. Mallory actually pulled me aside at her birthday party to ask how I'd managed it. "I always knew Garrett had a thing for you in college," she said, her voice tinged with envy. "But I never thought... who would have guessed he'd turn out like this?" "I know, right?" I laughed, sipping champagne that actually tasted good for once. Life's funny sometimes. What I didn't tell her was how calculated it all was. How I'd studied Garrett like a subject in school, learning exactly what he wanted to hear, exactly how to make him feel like the luckiest man alive. He wanted to feel desired. I couldn't keep my hands off him. He wanted intellectual stimulation. I read tech blogs and business journals so I could discuss his work. He wanted someone who believed in his dreams. I became his biggest cheerleader. The sex was fine. Garrett wasn't Brady or Jackson or any of the other guys who had made my pulse race in college, but he was so grateful, so eager to please, so amazed that someone like me was in his bed. I could work with that. I'd had passion before. What had it gotten me? A broken heart and an empty bank account. With Garrett, I had stability, security. I quit my marketing job. He insisted I didn't need to work, that I should focus on finding my passion. My passion became shopping, spa days, and lunches with my friends where I could casually mention the trips Garrett was planning for us. Cabo, Aspen, the Amalfi Coast. He proposed on our 1-year anniversary during a private dinner at the top of the Devon Tower. The ring was everything I'd dreamed of, a 3-carat cushion-cut diamond surrounded by smaller stones set in platinum. Probably cost him $80,000, maybe more. I cried when he got down on one knee, and they were real tears. Tears of relief that I'd finally made it, that I'd never have to worry about money again. The wedding planning consumed my life. I threw myself into it with the dedication of a general, planning a military campaign. The venue, Southern Hills Country Club. The dress, custom Vera Wang, $12,000. The flowers, flown in from Ecuador. The guest list, 300 of Oklahoma's elite, people who mattered, people who would see that I'd won. Garrett gave me carte blanche with the budget. "Whatever makes you happy, babe," he'd say, barely looking up from his laptop. He was always working, always in meetings, always flying to San Francisco or Austin or New York. I didn't mind. It gave me free rein to craft the perfect image of our life together. My friends were my co-conspirators in this fantasy. Mallory, Janessa, and Britt. We'd been tight since college, bonded by our shared experiences of dating the wrong guys and making bad decisions. They understood what this meant to me, what I'd been through to get here. "You're so lucky," Janessa would sigh, scrolling through my wedding Pinterest board. Garrett worships you." "He really does," Britt would agree. "Remember when Sloane dated that asshole Tyler? The one who forgot her birthday? Garrett would never—" They were right. Garrett would never forget my birthday. He'd never cheat, never lie, never make me feel like I wasn't enough. He'd also never make my heart race, never surprise me, except with expensive gifts, never challenge me or excite me or make me feel truly alive. But that was a trade-off I'd accepted, or so I thought. The night everything fell apart started like any other Friday. Garrett had texted that he was working late, again, something about a bug in the code that needed to be fixed before Monday's investor meeting. I ordered sushi from our favorite place, opened a bottle of wine, and invited the girls over. By the time they arrived, I was already 2 glasses in and feeling loose. Mallory brought another bottle of wine, Janessa brought gossip about her latest Tinder disaster, and Britt brought wedding magazines she'd picked up for inspiration. We sprawled across the living room, shoes kicked off, wedding magazines spread across the coffee table, wine flowing freely. The conversation drifted from wedding details to relationships to sex, as it always did after enough alcohol. "I still can't believe you're marrying Garrett Pemberton," Mallory laughed, refilling her glass. "Remember when he asked you to that formal junior year? You said you'd rather go to the library." "I did not say that," I protested, but I was laughing too. "You literally did," Britt chimed in. "You said, and I quote, 'I'd rather spend my Saturday night in the library than pretend to have fun with Garrett Pemberton.'" "Well, things change," I said, holding up my engagement ring. The diamonds caught the light, sending little rainbows across the walls. "They sure do," Janessa agreed. "From library nerd to tech millionaire. You played the long game, Sloane." "The longest game," I agreed, the wine making me bold. "Do you know how exhausting it is pretending to care about cryptocurrency and API interfaces and whatever the hell else he talks about?" Yeah, they all laughed, and I felt encouraged to continue. This was safe. These were my girls. They understood. "But seriously," I said, leaning forward conspiratorially, "I have landed myself the perfect rich simp." The word came out before I could stop it. Simp. It felt good to say it out loud, to acknowledge what I'd been thinking for months. "Sloane!" Mallory shrieked, but she was giggling. "What?" "It's true, I was on a roll now. He does whatever I want. I literally control everything. The apartment, the wedding, the vacations. I say jump, he asks how high, but usually he's too busy coding to even jump." "But do you love him?" Britt asked, always the romantic. I took another sip of wine. "I love the life he gives me. I love that I'll never have to check my bank balance before buying something. I love that my kids will go to private school and have trust funds." "That's not what she asked," Janessa pointed out. "Love is overrated," I said, waving my hand dismissively. "I loved Brady. Where did that get me? Crying in my car when he cheated with that sophomore? I loved Jackson. He couldn't even commit to dinner plans, let alone a relationship." "But Garrett's different," Britt said softly. "Exactly," I exclaimed. "He's different because he's boring. Safe, predictable. He thinks I'm this perfect woman who finally noticed him after all these years. He has no idea that I used to mock him in college. No idea that I'm only with him because—" I trailed off, the wine suddenly making me feel too honest. "Because what?" Mallory pressed. "Because I was tired of being broke," I finished. There, I said it. I was 28 years old, living paycheck to paycheck, watching everyone else get married and buy houses and take vacations I couldn't afford. And then there was Garrett, with his stupid Patek Philippe and his tech money, still looking at me like I was God's gift to Earth. "So you took the opportunity," Janessa said, nodding. "Smart." "The smartest thing I've ever done," I agreed. "Do you know he's never even questioned why I suddenly became interested in him? Never wondered why I went from ignoring his texts in college to moving in with him after 3 months. He's just so grateful that I chose him." "Men are simple," Mallory laughed. especially the nice ones. The nice ones are the easiest, I confirmed. They're so desperate for validation, for someone to make them feel special. You give them a little attention, a little affection, and they'll give you the world. But what about when you're married? Britt asked. You'll have to keep this up forever. Will I, though? I countered. Once we're married, once I have the ring and the house and maybe a kid or two, what's he going to do? Divorce me? He won't. He's too nice, too afraid of being alone again. And even if he did, hello alimony. Hello child support. I'm set either way. You're evil, Janessa laughed, but it was appreciative, not judgmental. I'm practical, I corrected. Love doesn't pay the bills. Love doesn't buy you a house in Nichols Hills or send your kids to Heritage Hall. Garrett's coding skills do that. What if he finds out? Britt worried. What if he realizes you don't actually love him? He won't, I said confidently. You know why? Because he doesn't want to. He wants to believe the fantasy as much as I need it to be true. He wants to be the guy who got the girl who was out of his league. It makes him feel like he's won. And you've won too, Mallory pointed out. From marketing coordinator to millionaire's wife. Future millionaire's wife, I corrected, holding up my ring again. T-6 months until I officially win. We spent the next hour discussing wedding details, but the conversation kept circling back to my relationship with Garrett. The more I drank, the more honest I became. I told them about how I had to fake enthusiasm for his work stories, how I scheduled my gym sessions for when he wanted to have his coding marathons, so I wouldn't have to pretend to be interested, how I'd perfected the art of seeming supportive while actually shopping online during his video calls. The key, I explained, feeling like a professor teaching a master class, is to give them just enough. Just enough affection to keep them hooked, just enough interest to make them feel heard, just enough sex to keep them satisfied, but never so much that you exhaust yourself. You should write a book, Janessa suggested, How to Marry a Tech Millionaire. Chapter 1, I said dramatically, lower your standards, raise your bank balance. We all dissolved into laughter. I felt powerful, clever, like I'd cracked some code that other women were too romantic or too proud to admit existed. Love was for movies and romance novels. Real life required strategy. The funniest part, I continued, the wine making me cruel, is that he thinks he's so smart. He's literally a genius with computers, but he can't see what's right in front of him. His fiancée is only with him for his money, and he's too blinded by finally getting the girl he wanted in college to notice. Maybe he does notice, Britt suggested quietly. Maybe he just doesn't care. Trust me, he doesn't notice, I said. Last week he actually said, and I quote, I can't believe how lucky I am that you love me. Love him, can you imagine? What did you say? Mallory asked. I said, I love you too, babe, and then distracted him with a blowjob so I wouldn't have to keep talking about feelings. More laughter, more wine, more truth spilling out like the expensive Pinot Noir we were drinking. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if he'd stayed a nobody, I mused. If the startup had failed, if he was just another programmer making $70,000 a year. Would I have given him a chance? No, all three of my friends said in unison. Exactly, I agreed. I would have smiled politely at Whole Foods, made an excuse, and never thought about him again. But 8 figures in the bank? Suddenly he's husband material. You're not the first woman to marry for money, Janessa pointed out. It's basically a tale as old as time. True, I acknowledged. I'm just honest about it. How many women are out there pretending to be in love with men they can barely tolerate? At least I admit it to myself, and to you guys. Our lips are sealed, Mallory promised, making a zipping motion across her mouth. They better be, I said, only half joking. This information dies with us. As far as the world is concerned, I'm the devoted fiancé who finally recognized what a catch Garrett Pemberton was. Academy Award for Best Actress goes to Sloane Whitfield, Britt announced, holding up her wine glass. I'll thank you all in my speech, I laughed. taking a bow from my seated position. The conversation eventually moved on to other topics. Janessa's work drama, Mallory's latest shopping haul, Britt's mother-in-law problems. But I kept drinking, kept feeling invincible, kept thinking about how perfectly I'd played this whole situation. Around midnight, the girls started to leave. Hugs and air kisses and promises to go dress shopping next weekend. I walked them to the door, still buzzing from wine and the high of confession. "Thanks for tonight," I said, meaning it. "Sometimes I just need to be real with someone." "We get it," Mallory assured me. "Your secret's safe with us." After they left, I stumbled back to the living room to clean up. Wine glasses everywhere, wedding magazines scattered across the floor. I felt dizzy but satisfied. Tomorrow I'd go back to playing the perfect fiancé, but tonight I'd gotten to be myself. I was carrying glasses to the kitchen when I heard something from the bedroom. A cough? I froze, listening. Nothing. Just the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic 30 floors below. I cleaned up, changed into pajamas, and crawled into bed. Garrett's side was empty, as usual. He probably wouldn't be home until 2 or 3 in the morning. I'd gotten used to falling asleep alone, waking up to find him passed out beside me, still in his clothes from the day before. The room spun slightly as I closed my eyes. Too much wine. I'd have a killer headache tomorrow, but it had been worth it. Sometimes you needed to tell the truth, even if only to your closest friends. I must have fallen asleep immediately because the next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through the windows. My head felt like someone was driving nails into it. I reached for Garrett's side of the bed. Still empty. Or empty again? I couldn't tell if he'd come home at all. I stumbled to the kitchen for water and ibuprofen, then made coffee. It was Saturday, which meant Garrett would probably work from home if he was here. I'd learned to leave him alone on Saturdays, to find somewhere else to be while he typed away at his computer, lost in a world I didn't understand and didn't care to. I was scrolling through Instagram, liking photos from last night that the girls had already posted, when I heard the bedroom door open. Garrett appeared, fully dressed. "Morning, babe," I said, not looking up from my phone. "Crazy night?" "You didn't come to bed." He didn't respond. I glanced up to find him staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, exactly, but something worse. Disappointment? Disgust? "What's wrong?" I asked, suddenly uneasy. "We need to talk," he said quietly. Those 4 words. Every woman's nightmare. My mind raced through possibilities. Had he found out about my credit card debt? The shopping sprees I'd hidden from him? Some comment I'd made to someone that had gotten back to him? "Okay," I said carefully. "What about—" He sat down across from me at the kitchen island, maintaining distance I'd never noticed before. "I heard something disturbing yesterday. About you. About us." My blood went cold. "What do you mean? Who told you what?" "That's not important," he said. "What matters is whether it's true. Have you been talking about me? About our relationship? Saying things that—" He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. I forced a laugh. "Babe, people talk. You know how jealous some people are of what we have? Someone's probably just trying to cause drama." "So it's not true," he pressed. "You haven't been telling people that you're only with me for my money? That you think I'm what was the word? A simp?" The word hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't happening. Who had told him? One of the girls? Someone who'd overheard? My mind scrambled for an explanation, a lie, anything to fix this. "I would never say that," I said, putting all my acting skills into the performance. "Garrett, I love you. How could you even think that?" He studied my face for a long moment. Then he shook his head slowly. "I was home last night, Sloane." The words didn't compute at first. Home? But he'd texted that he was working late. What? I whispered. I came home with a stomachache around 9. I was going to tell you, but I heard voices in the living room. I didn't want to interrupt your girls' night, so I just went to bed. His voice was steady, controlled, nothing like the emotional Garrett I was used to. I woke up around 11, and I heard everything. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the counter to keep from swaying. He'd heard everything. Every horrible truth I'd spewed, every cruel observation, every calculated admission. "Garrett," I started, but he held up a hand. "I need you to leave," he said simply. "Leave?" I repeated stupidly. "This is our home. We're getting married in 6 months. You can't just—" "I can, and I am," he interrupted. "The lease is in my name. Everything is in my name. I want you out." Because of one conversation, I tried desperately. I was drunk. The girls were egging me on. I didn't mean any of it. "Which part didn't you mean?" he asked quietly. "The part where you called me boring? The part where you admitted you only noticed me when you found out about my money? The part where you explained your strategy for keeping me just satisfied enough to not notice you don't love me?" Each phrase was like a slap. I felt tears building, real ones this time. I was just talking. You know how women get when they're together. We exaggerate. We say things we don't mean. "Stop," he said firmly. "Just stop. For once in our relationship, stop lying to me." "I'm not lying." But even as I said it, I knew it was hopeless. The look in his eyes told me he'd already made up his mind. "You know what the worst part is?" he continued. "It's not even that you don't love me." I think part of me always suspected that. You went from barely acknowledging my existence to being obsessed with me right after my company sold. "I'm not an idiot, Sloane." "Then why?" I started, but he wasn't finished. "I thought maybe over time you'd grow to actually care about me. That what started as practical could become real. I thought I could be enough for you eventually." He laughed, but it was bitter. "God, listening to you last night, the contempt in your voice. You don't even like me." "That's not true," I protested weakly. "Yes, it is. And you know what? I deserve better than that. I deserve someone who actually wants to be with me, not just my bank account." The tears were flowing now. "Garrett, please, let's talk about this. We can go to counseling. We can work through this." "There's nothing to work through," he said. "You showed me who you really are last night, and I'm grateful for that, actually. Better to find out now than after the wedding." "You're throwing away everything we have because of one drunken conversation?" "What do we have, Sloane?" he asked. "Tell me. Without mentioning the apartment, the money, the wedding, the lifestyle, what do we actually have together?" I opened my mouth, then closed it. Without those things, what did we have? Shared interests? Number? Deep conversations? Never. Passion? I'd faked it. Love? Only from his side. "That's what I thought," he said when I didn't answer. "I'll give you a week to find somewhere else to stay. After that, I'll have your things sent wherever you want them." "A week!" I shrieked. "Garrett, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable," he said. "I could ask you to leave today. I'm giving you time to figure things out." "What am I supposed to tell people?" I asked, grasping at straws. "The wedding is in 6 months. Deposits have been made. People will ask questions. Tell them the truth," he suggested, "or make something up." "You're good at that." The coldness in his voice was killing me. This wasn't the Garrett I knew, the one who looked at me with puppy dog eyes and did whatever I wanted. This was someone else entirely. Someone with a backbone I'd never seen before. "What about the ring?" I asked, hating how mercenary it sounded, but unable to stop myself. "Keep it," he said. "Consider it payment for services rendered." The insult landed like a punch. "I'm not a prostitute." "No," he agreed. "You're worse." "At least prostitutes are honest about the transaction." I slapped him. I couldn't help it. The crack of my palm against his cheek echoed in the silent apartment. He didn't even flinch. just touched his face and nodded as if I'd confirmed something. "Feel better?" he asked. "Fuck you," I spat. "I'll be staying at a hotel for the week," he continued as if I hadn't spoken. "Please be gone when I get back." He stood up, walked to the bedroom, and came back with a packed bag. He'd planned this. He'd packed before confronting me. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment decision. "Garrett, wait!" I called as he headed for the door. "Please, let's just talk about this." He paused at the door but didn't turn around. We did talk. For a year, we talked. Except I was the only one being honest. And then he was gone. I sat in that kitchen for hours, staring at nothing, trying to process what had just happened. My phone buzzed with texts from the girls asking about brunch plans. I ignored them. What could I possibly say? That my carefully constructed life had collapsed because I couldn't keep my drunk mouth shut? By afternoon, I'd moved from shock to anger. How dare he? After everything I'd done for him? I'd transformed him from a nerdy nobody into someone presentable. I'd decorated his apartment, planned social events, made him look like a success instead of just another tech geek with money. And this was how he repaid me? But the anger couldn't sustain itself, because underneath it was the cold, hard truth. I'd fucked up. I'd gotten comfortable, gotten sloppy. I'd forgotten the cardinal rule of gold digging: never admit it out loud, never break character, never let them see behind the curtain. I spent the week looking for apartments I could afford on my own. The options were depressing. Studios in bad neighborhoods, shared apartments with strangers. Nothing like the luxury I'd grown accustomed to. My friends rallied around me, but their support felt hollow. Mallory offered her couch, but I could see the calculation in her eyes. Was I toxic now? Would associating with me hurt her own chances? Janessa was full of advice about getting a lawyer, going after alimony, but we weren't married yet. I had no claim on anything. Britt just kept saying how sorry she was, but I could tell she was thinking about her own husband, wondering if he'd overheard any of her less-than-loving comments over the years. The humiliation was the worst part. Having to call vendors to cancel wedding services, having to tell my family the engagement was off, having to watch my carefully curated Instagram life dissolve as I deleted photos of us together, removed bride-to-be from my bio, tried to pretend like this was mutual, amicable, for the best. But people talked. Of course they did. Oklahoma City's social circles were small, incestuous. Word got out that I'd been dumped, that Garrett Pemberton had kicked me out with nothing. The speculation was vicious. He'd caught me cheating. I'd stolen from him. He'd found someone younger, prettier, better. The truth was almost worse. He'd simply realized I didn't love him. I moved back to Tulsa, back to my parents' house at 29 years old. The shame was suffocating. My childhood bedroom with its twin bed and faded posters felt like a prison. My mother tried to be supportive, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. She'd been so proud when I'd gotten engaged to Garrett, had bragged to all her friends about her daughter marrying a tech millionaire. Now she had to explain why I was living at home again, working at a marketing agency for $45,000 a year. The last time I saw Garrett was 3 months after he'd kicked me out. I was in Oklahoma City for a work conference, staying at a mediocre hotel by the airport. I decided to go to our old favorite restaurant, his favorite, really, I'd always thought it was overpriced, for dinner. Alone. I was sitting at the bar, nursing a glass of house wine I could barely afford, when I saw him. He was at a corner table with a woman. Pretty, but not stunning, girl next door type with minimal makeup and a genuine smile. The kind of woman I would have dismissed as basic, boring, beneath notice. But the way she looked at him, the way he looked at her, it was real in a way that made my chest ache. They were laughing at something, and his whole face was transformed. He looked younger, lighter, happier than I'd ever seen him in our entire year together. He must have felt my stare because he glanced up. Our eyes met across the restaurant. I waited for some sign of the old Garrett, the one who'd worshipped me, who'd done anything to make me happy. Instead, he just nodded politely like I was a distant acquaintance and turned back to his date. That's when it really hit me. I hadn't just lost a meal ticket. I'd lost someone who genuinely cared about me, who'd wanted to build a life with me. I'd been so focused on what he could give me that I'd never considered what I could have given him, what we could have built together if I'd been capable of seeing him as more than a bank account. I left before my food arrived, threw some cash on the bar, and practically ran to my rental car. I sat in the parking lot and cried, really cried for the first time since he'd left. Not pretty tears designed to manipulate, but ugly, body-shaking sobs for the life I'd thrown away. It's been 6 months now. I still check his social media sometimes, torture myself with updates about his new company, his new girlfriend, his new life that doesn't include me. They went to Cabo last month, stayed at the same resort he'd booked for what would have been our honeymoon. She posted a photo of them at sunset, no caption needed. The happiness radiated from the image. My friends from college have distanced themselves, not officially, but the invitations have dried up. The group texts have moved on without me. I'm the cautionary tale now, the one who flew too close to the sun and got burned. I go to work. I come home to my childhood room. I swipe through dating apps looking at men who can't offer me anything close to what I had. Sometimes I match with them, go on dates to Chili's or Applebee's, listen to them talk about their kids from previous relationships, or their plans to maybe go back to school someday. I smile and nod and pretend to be interested, but all I can think about is that penthouse apartment, that Patek Philippe, that life I had in my grasp. The worst part? The absolute worst part? I catch myself sometimes actually missing Garrett himself. Not his money or the lifestyle or the security. Him. His excitement when he solved a coding problem, his terrible jokes that I'd rolled my eyes at, the way he'd bring me coffee in bed on Sunday mornings, prepared exactly how I liked it without having to ask. I'd had someone who paid attention to me, who cared about my happiness, who wanted to share his success with me. And I'd been so busy calculating the value of what he gave me that I'd never recognized the value of who he was. My therapist, who I can barely afford but desperately need, says this is growth. That recognizing what I've lost beyond the material things is the first step toward becoming a better person. That maybe this had to happen for me to understand what really matters in life. Maybe she's right. Or maybe she's just saying what I pay her to say. Either way, I'm stuck living with the consequences of my choices. Every night in my twin bed, every morning in my beat-up Honda Civic, every lunch break eating a sad desk salad instead of meeting friends at upscale restaurants, it's all a reminder of how spectacularly I'd failed. I played the game perfectly until I forgot it was a game. I showed my hand, revealed my strategy, admitted the truth to the one person who should never have known it. And in doing so, I lost everything. The champagne flute I'd been holding, the last one from our engagement set, slipped from my fingers. It shattered on the floor of my childhood bedroom, the pieces scattering across the worn carpet. I stared at the fragments, thinking how appropriate it was. My life in pieces, sharp and dangerous, impossible to put back together. Garrett was probably with her right now, that pretty, genuine woman who looked at him like he was her whole world. They were probably cooking dinner together in that beautiful kitchen, laughing at inside jokes, building something real. Something I'd never have because I'd never learned how to build, only how to take. I picked up the pieces of broken glass carefully, one by one. No metaphor there, just a mess to clean up. Just like everything else in my life now. A mess of my own making that I'd spend years, maybe forever, trying to fix. Outside my window, Tulsa stretched out under a gray sky. Not the glittering lights of Oklahoma City from 30 floors up, just ordinary suburbia full of ordinary people living ordinary lives. People who worked regular jobs and drove regular cars and loved each other without calculation or strategy. Maybe someday I'd learn to be one of them. Maybe someday I'd meet someone and feel something real. something that had nothing to do with their bank balance or what they could give me. Maybe someday I'd be capable of the kind of love that Garrett had offered me, that I'd been too shallow and calculating to recognize. Or maybe not. Maybe some people are just broken in ways that can't be fixed. Maybe I'd spend the rest of my life as I was now, alone, bitter, full of regret for chances missed and love dismissed. Either way, this was my reality now. No penthouse, no ring, no fairy tale wedding. Just me and my mistakes and the knowledge that I'd had everything I thought I wanted and threw it away for the momentary satisfaction of mocking the man who'd loved me. The perfect rich simp, I'd called him. Turns out the only simp in our relationship had been me. Too stupid to recognize real love when it was right in front of me. Too shallow to see value in anything that couldn't be deposited in a bank account. Too proud to keep my mouth shut when it mattered most. And now, like they say, pride goes before a fall. And what a fall it had been.